Well, hey there, you're on the internet. I'm rediscovering what free time is, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is by Herbin, or Herbin, and I only have it in cartridges, and when they come in cartridges, they come in little tins like this. Obviously, this held a different kind of ink, but little tins hold 6. And when it comes in a bottle, it comes in a bottle like this, which is maddening to try and use to fill your pen. And I keep it in cartridges. So here's what it looks like in the cartridge. Yeah, today we're talking about Herbin's Vert Empire, or Empire Green, which is a pretty unique kind of color, and that's partly why I like it. I don't really know many other inks quite like this one. Now, all the tests were done in this Kaweco Sport with a, broad nib. Let's check out the chromatography, which reveals some of the uniqueness of this ink. Now, as you can see, come on camera. As you can see, there is some potential for water resistance, but in a much different color than what is migrating. As you can see, there's sort of this slate gray that goes up, and there's this brownish color, and then up above there's sort of more of a piney green. So, moving on to the paper test. Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. Now, I hope this comes through on camera. 20 seconds to dry, which, considering it's a broad nib and this is a fairly watery ink, not too bad, but if you look, it's quite watery. If you look at the top of the E, just how thin that is, and it gets darker over time. So when this was freshly written, this is a couple days old, when it was freshly written, it was still fairly thin. But anyways, it said slightly woolly finish, longish dry times. It's an unusual color. It's sort of a, I sort of don't know how to explain it except to say that it's a rather toady green. And as you can see, what remains is that slate gray color, maybe touching on brown, but mostly a slate gray. And in the parts where it's wettest, some seriously remains. So, yeah, it has some water resistance, which for Herbin inks is almost unheard of. Next is Rhodia 80 grams per square meter, where 17 seconds to dry, and I feel like the shading is much more pronounced. I mean, that is one of the weird contrasts to having such a watery ink, is somehow it's like because you start out with such low standards, like when it works, it works. So it's still very watery in some parts, but then that also contrasts kind of nicely with where it gets pretty dark. So, I don't know. Good flow, improved dry times, no bleed feather spread, and again, fairly decent water test. I mean, that's fairly readable, it's fairly dark. It's not perfect, but it's there. It's more there than most Herbin inks. Next is Tomoe River Paper, where there was 24 seconds to dry, which is a bit on the long side, but again, this is a very watery ink, and it was a broad nib. But I feel like you get good contrast here. So, yeah, dries darker and more gray. When you first write, it looks really watery and it looks very green, but then as it dries, it darkens a little bit, turns a little more gray, then you give it a couple days and it gets a bit darker. And I'm rather impressed with this water test because Tomoe River loves to let ink just slide away, but that's fairly there and fairly even. So, not too bad. Next is the awful 20-pound copier paper that I've been forced to use lately. 3 seconds to dry, which yeah, I said very little in favor of this pen, paper, ink combo. There's feathering, and it is ugly. Look at how spongy that gets. I mean, it's just, ugh. It's messy. And, like, no shading, and it's just... I mean, it retains that kind of unique color, but... And, again, that's the darkest water test we've seen, but it's, I mean, that looks like an algae farm. I mean, look at all the colored feathers shooting off, and... Yeah, it's pretty nasty. Next is Mead Notebook Paper, where 3 seconds to dry. Say not much going for this pen, paper, ink combo. Yeah, it's very flattened. You lose all that shading, which, you know, water test is very messy. I mean, there's still a good bit there, but what's there is really messy. It's, yeah, it's not great. Really not great. And last is Moleskin Notebook Paper, where I said 7 seconds to dry, question mark. I really can't explain that. But you still get some shading, I mean, if you look at this a bit. But, yeah, just hints of it. And the feathering is so bad, I feel like it detracts from well, a lot. Come on, camera, focus. Because I hope you see that. Like, if you look at like the I and the T and the L and the S, and yeah, it's all over the place. It's pretty extreme. It gives it a bad woolly texture. It's not great. The water test on a sliding scale was pretty nice. It didn't explode too much. It didn't dye the paper a great deal. It's still fairly there, still fairly dark. Could be worse. So there you go. That's Herbin's Vert Empire, or Imperial Green. Did very well in this broad nib. Did very well on the nicer papers. Really brought out the shading, which was kind of required because it is a very watery ink. I love the unique color. It behaves fairly well, and it's unique. I mean, I don't know many other colors quite like this. The closest I could come is maybe Diamine Salamander, and even that doesn't quite hit the same notes. So for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. Bye.